a huge sigh of relief for Monique Baza and her family. Raymond Tatautau Camacho will never be released from prison again. He was sentenced to life with no parole for abducting Baza from the Crown Bakery parking lot and repeatedly raping her. Monique Baza and her family can now finally put this case behind them. Baza waited for over 2 years to see this day in court, the day Raymond Tatautau Camacho would finally get sentenced for the heinous crimes he committed. Baza explains it best.
Everything about the morning of October 15, 2012 was against my will. Raymond Camacho chose to kidnap me, chose to sexually assault me, not once, but twice. How do you help a person, a father, a husband, a son, and a brother, who continually blame and torture themselves for not being there to protect and save you, understand that it is not their fault?
Baza did not hesitate to ask for the maximum punishment of life without the possibility of parole, and neither did the Attorney General's office. Camacho's defense attorney, Doug Moylan, fought for a lesser sentence of 15 years as allowed by law. Moylan says Camacho cooperated and has owned up to his actions. The AG's office disagrees, saying Camacho is a career criminal.
Because it sends the proper message to the community that if you do something wrong, you cooperate, you try to make good on it, you'll be punished less.
He has been given every chance, multiple counseling, multiple drug and substance abuse counseling, and it hasn't worked. At this point, the longer he stays out, the more endangered people become.
Camacho was also given a chance to speak.
I just want to say I'm sincerely sorry to the victim, Mrs. Baza, for the pain and suffering that I've brought upon you, as well as your family and friends. And being incarcerated makes you feel safe, then please bring justice. And after all of this course, I hope that one day I will become a better person. And I'm sorry.
When he apologized to you in court today, did you believe him?
Water under the bridge, I didn't believe him at all. I think that, like the AG's office had mentioned, or if he's made apologies before, what would be any different about my apology now?
Raymond Tatautau Camacho, the court's going to sentence you for kidnapping, 25 years. For criminal sexual conduct as a first-degree felony, life, without any possibility of parole.
Although Baza says she and her family continue to suffer emotional pain, she says it was the support of her family that got her through it and gave her the voice to call for justice.
Governor Eddie Calvo says he will veto Senator Mike San-Nicolas's bill to repeal raises for the governor, lieutenant governor, cabinet members, and senators. Governor Calvo says these raises were recommended by the Hay Group, and if they are repealed, it will create a major imbalance in GovGuam pay.
If this were to be enacted into law, the whole issue, the whole rationale behind the Hay Plan when it comes to modernizing and looking at competitive pay scales, and even within government of Guam, there will be this severe imbalance. So again, if that is passed, I will veto the bill, consistent to how I've been since the very beginning.
Governor Eddie Calvo says that the Hay recommended raises were meant to make for fair and equal compensation throughout GovGuam based on the position of the employee. He says repealing the raises for the governor, lieutenant governor, cabinet members, and senators would be unfair.
Mid-level management and lower level management positions in other agencies would be above the salary of a governor. There will be about 70 plus positions in other agencies that are higher pay than the governor of Guam. And unfortunately for my staff and all those hardworking members of the cabinet, their pay is lower than mine. So there is a tremendous disparity.
The governor says it's not just about his salary, but the salaries of his cabinet members. For example, he points out that the director of DOA, who oversees funds for all of GovGuam, would make $30,000 less than the comptroller of DOE, who only oversees the funds of that one agency.
I think we have to go back into how the Hay Plan was formulated. It was based on modernizing the general pay plan that had not been modernized in over 20 years.
The governor says that these Hay recommended raises were meant to update GovGuam's out-of-date pay scales, not only for the rank and file of GovGuam, but for its upper management and leadership as well.
As the Guam Chamber of Commerce welcomes the new year, Governor Eddie Calvo earlier this afternoon told them he's hopeful about what's ahead for the island. PNC's Rosal Romanes has more in this report.
The governor says he's optimistic about the future of Guam's economy. Governor Eddie Calvo was the guest speaker today at the first Guam Chamber of Commerce meeting of the year, where he brought stakeholders up to date on tourism, the military buildup, and capital improvement plans, among other topics. Governor Calvo says Guam can look forward to a lot of economic activity. In fact, he says our island is looking at about $13.3 billion of construction over the next 13 years.
With utilities, we have about $3.3 billion through GWA and GPA. GWA is looking at about $400+ million in infrastructure investment to meet Clean Water Act. And GPA is also planning nearly $1 billion, about $850 million in capital improvements.
As for tourism, the island's leading industry, despite some annual reductions in our largest market from Japan, Governor Calvo says he still expects to meet the Tourism 2020 goal of 2 million visitors to the island by the year 2020.
What I heard from Gita, we already have 3 letters of interest in regards to applying for those QCs. And I think that adds up to maybe about 800 rooms when you add those three potential developers. So, we're almost at 50% of what our desire is for 1,600 rooms, and moving forward that vision on 2 million tourists.
Governor Calvo says 2015 is the time to strengthen the island in terms of infrastructure and the quality of life for its people. Rosal Romanes, PNC News.
A woman suffering from cancer is suing United Airlines for kicking her off a flight bound for Guam last month. Christine Palacios filed a federal lawsuit against the airline after she says she already boarded a flight on December 18th, along with her doctor and medical equipment. Palacios says she was in Manila for treatment, suffering from metastatic cancer, respiratory failure, severe fatigue. She flew to Manila on business class and tried to purchase another business class ticket back to Guam, realizing that her medical condition required the additional space. But Palacios says United Airlines denied her a business class ticket because she failed to book it within 24 hours, despite the fact that business class seats were available. She agreed to sit in economy, but United Airlines employees forced her off the plane, she says, along with her luggage. As a result, what she called willful misconduct, Palacios says she suffered severe and grievous injuries. The incident aggravated her medical condition and caused her medical expenses to increase as well. You can read the complaint online at pacificnewscenter.com.
The Guam Education Board has approved a $328 million budget request for the Department of Education for fiscal year 2016. PNC's Betsy Brown joins us now with more information. Betsy?
Janella, this budget request is actually about $100 million more than what DOE asked for last year. So why the increase? I sat down with Superintendent John Fernandez today to find out.
I would say that the $94 million that we're asking over and above this year's appropriation is not unjustified in the sense that, we're just pulling numbers out of the air.
Superintendent John Fernandez says $12 million of DOE's fiscal year 2016 budget request account for a shortfall in the current budget. To make sure every student gets a textbook, DOE also wants $15.2 million more than usual for educational materials. And while recently passed laws will fund $100 million in school improvements outside of their budget request, Fernandez says that won't be enough to repair all of DOE's infrastructure, which is why $20 million is being requested for capital improvement projects.
I think number one amongst all of those needs will be renovations to all of our restrooms, for instance, across the school system.
Those are some of the major items that count for a large chunk of that additional $94 million. And pay raises from the Competitive Wage Act also resulted in the need to hire 80 additional employees for the special education program.
That means that under our federal formula grants, such as our special education grant, that meant that for the current level of aides that work individually with our children, we were not able to afford all of them due to the increase in wages. And so in order to maintain the current service level, we would need to have some local funding support.
And Janella and Clint, you both know there were a lot of school fights in the news recently, and so Fernandez says funds for more personnel on school campuses are also reflected in this budget request. But of course, DOE will have to defend all of that before the legislature, where it heads next.
And in related news, while they were able to approve a budget last night, GEB members were not able to elect a vice chair. Maria Gutierrez, Dr. Jose Cruz, and Ken Chargaloff were nominees, but a vote was called 3 times, and the board was unable to break a tie. They did manage to elect Peter Alexis Atta as their chairman. Atta says the board's inability to elect a vice chair shows why a 9th member needs to be appointed. The new chairman plans to ask the governor to appoint someone to represent the business community on the board.